and welcome to another edition of Digital Transform Survivors, the podcast that talks to industry professionals about their challenges, learning how to manage things like complex web estates and complex audience sets. I'm your host, Julian Tedstone, Strategy Director at Coherence, and we specialize in helping organize manage some of those problems. Today, I'm really thrilled to welcome Scott Brinker, former VP platform ecosystem at HubSpot and editor of the chiefmartech.com blog, and just an absolute legend in terms of helping us to understand the really, really complex and confusing space of marketing technology and how it all fits together. So Scott's work has really helped to shape how we understand the Martech ecosystem. And those that know him will know he's been the sponsor and the creator of the iconic supergraphic, which collected together all of the icons representing all of the different tools that are available in the Martech space, which back in the day was a small, manageable couple of hundred. Felt like quite a cozy little set, and now is a monstrous fractal, infinite fractal of logos that seems to span the universe. I really recommend you go and take a look at that if you haven't already. As you'd expect, Scott's latest focus is on the effect that AI is having on marketing. Particularly now, at the moment, Scott has got a survey out on AI context engineering. We'll post a link for that. But if you get a chance to respond on that, that will be part of his, State of the Nation on Martech report next year. So, Scott, really great to have you on the session, on the podcast session today. How are you doing?
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, and thanks for that very kind intro. The giant fractal remark for the landscape. That's one of the kindest things people have ever said about that. So.
I bet there's a range. I bet there's
Thank
a range.
you.
Yeah. Whenever I see that graphic, I don't know whether to be impressed or horrified. How does it?
A little bit of both. Probably more on the horrified, but
yeah. And I guess as marketers, part of our challenge is to work out what we do with all of this stuff and how we plug it all together. And maybe that's a good place to start. So, how did you start with that logo map, the super graphic? What was your impetus for starting that? And how have you seen it grow over the years?
yeah. So many, many years ago, around 2009, 2010, a fellow named Terry Kawaja, who ran an investment bank, Luma, came up with this Lumascape for the ad tech ecosystem, which I thought was fascinating. It was like the different categories between like publishers and consumers and what were the different technologies. I thought it was fantastic. Since I was a little bit more in what we would call Martech, we could have the whole ad tech versus Martech debate and why these things are separate when they probably shouldn't be. But, everything else, all the other technologies that marketers were using. And so that's what inspired me to like, oh, well, I'm curious, let's try and put together what are the categories and who are the, vendors in that. And that was, the first one in 2011 that had 150 at the time. Now we think of it as quaint. Back then I was like, oh my goodness, 150. Surely this is going to consolidate. And so of course, the year over year updates on that, where for a while it was like growing exponentially. That was a surprise as much to me as anyone else.
And that's it, because there has been. That's the shock. There has been consolidation within that cohort. So lots of those products have been acquired and they've been rolled into cloud suites, and those cloud suites have gone on to acquire others. But it's just the growth has been kind of exponential as different categories have arrived on the scene.
Yeah, it's like there's the exit rate and there's the entrance rate.
Yeah.
And the challenge we just had in the industry is, yes, you're absolutely right. There's consolidation continuously, and not just happy consolidation of, companies being acquired.
Yeah.
There's a bunch that just completely go out of business.
Yeah.
But the rate at which new startups come into the space has just outpaced that exit rate, at least to date. And the easier and easier it becomes for anyone who has a software idea to be like, oh, I can instantiate that. I don't know if we're quite at the point where we're like vibe coding legitimate Martech apps, but Could that happen in the next few years? I mean, maybe.
Well, it feels like it's coming, doesn't it? And that segues us nicely to well, what's been going on over the past couple of years. I can't think of anything that might have been happening in the Martech space, apart from, of course, AI has been really really dominating all the conversations. And yeah, over the conversations we've had on this podcast, we've been talking to a number of practitioners who look after DXP stacks and CMS technologies. They're all seeing marked differences in user behavior and the amount of organic traffic that are coming into their sites. And this is starting to really affect the conversation. And I think there's two sides to it. There's what AI can do in terms of, I guess, helping us as marketing technologists to be more effective and to reach people with better communications and serve them better. That's one part of it. And then I guess the other part of it is how we use AI as consumers of web content to change the way that we, search and interact. So, what do you think you're starting to see? Can are you in a position to start breaking out some of the major trends that you're seeing in the way that AI is affecting our space?
Yeah, well, this whole thing around like AI and now this is how quickly things move. It's no longer cool to just talk about AI. Now you
Right.
have to be talking about AI agents and
Yeah.
agentic stuff.
Yeah.
The definition of which seems highly variant depending on who you're talking to. But I think, I like the distinction you made because when I think of it, think of like three buckets of AI that are changing marketing. There's the set of AI tools that we as marketers are using behind the scenes to like both accelerate the creation of what we do and also the analysis of what we do. For a number of marketers, it's expanding the scope of what they're even able to personally accomplish on their own. So that's a whole set of stuff. And at least in Martech world, those are a lot of the tools we talk about. There's then a set of these tools that marketers are still the ones that they own and they control, but they're customer facing. The most obvious one being like the website chatbots that, let's admit it, for years those things basically sucked. But now they're getting pretty good because these LLM engines are very good at, having this sort of conversational engagement. We're attaching those bots to more of the right sort of data on the back end for knowledge bases and ticket histories and whatnot. And so you see it in like the resolution rates for customer service. Those are getting good, but there's other use cases of, us having these AI agents that are engaging in inbound or outbound emails with folks.
Yeah.
There's some philosophical
Yes.
debate as to
Yeah.
is that a good thing to do or not.
Yeah.
But we see that. But then there's this third category of AI that's changing marketing. I think we're just now starting to really have the conversation about, and it's still very early, which is like it's going to be AI on the buyer side,
Mhm.
and that is going to change the entire dynamic of like, okay, how do we as marketers even reach and engage with our audience?
And that is a real heads up, isn't it? Because it's changing some of the fundamentals. If we have, if we're tasking agents to do things on our behalf, and I've recently, well, actually not so recently. We for a little while now we've been doing things like using our favorite AI kind of chat services of choice as a proxy search engine, as a way of collating internet search options and then playing them back to us in a way that makes sense. And then I guess we're adding our own contexts and search parameters to that. So it feels like search is being, I guess, personalized in a way that it's been difficult to do previously. Do you think that's going to be a growing factor going forwards?
Yeah, I think we've clearly crossed the tipping point. And one of the things that's so amazing about this stuff, just stepping back, is the speed at which changes are happening and some of these things are being adopted. It dwarfs anything we've ever seen before. So yeah, the fact that now, Google has basically embraced the, AI summaries are clearly being in the mode of like, yeah, just go ahead and engage in Gemini the way you would ChatGPT or, Claude. Yeah, is just the world of search as we knew it is kind of gone now.
Mm. And that's given what our industry has spent in terms of time and resources on it, optimizing our web platforms for search is really quite something.
Yeah, now again, there's not to say that there aren't a lot of challenges, this shift, is bringing to us, but at the same time, I mean, one door closes, another door opens. It's still very much the case that all of this is about content and information and engagement happening in the digital domain. And yeah, for marketers, it's now becoming like, okay, yeah. What do marketers do? Marketers have a very simple mission. It's like, go where the consumer is, go
Yes.
where the customer
Yes.
is,
Yeah.
we're here to serve them. And so they move to these AI, generative engines, these AI answer engines. And so now we as marketers are like, okay, how do we engage these customers? How do we help them discover us? How do we help make sure they're getting the right information? When they do eventually, come our way outside of the AI bubble, how do we make sure we live up to that opportunity? And yeah, this is a whole new set of challenges for us. And in case you were getting bored with the old playbook, now we got to do a new one.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's fine. I mean, marketers, we like to move on to new things, don't we? We don't like being stuck with the same old, same old. So I guess it's good news that we got something new to look at, which is great. So I guess the thing that's focusing our attention then is AEO. That's what a lot of people are talking about, like right at this moment, which is answer engine optimization. Could you break that down for us? What does it mean, and how is it affecting our behaviors?
Yeah, I think at the highest level, it's this idea of, okay, now that, consumers, prospects are turning to things like ChatGPT or Claude or whatnot to do their very early research and discovery of oh, I'm looking for something, something, or how would you compare this? Or what are the options? How would I solve X? And then these engines have, hoovered up, a huge amount of content on the internet. They also increasingly are able to do dynamic, searches and do inference on that. But they sort of munge all that together and then come up with the answers or the results for folks, which they keep getting better and people really love it. It is kind of overall challenging for marketing, but for, societies and overall, I think it's a good step forward in, our ability to get information faster. But of course, now for marketers, okay, well, how do I make sure that I am showing up, in the relevant answers, for my particular brand? And so, because these engines are absorbing content, they're as hungry for content as Google's search ever was, but with a little bit of differences in okay, how do you influence them? It's not clear that, page rank type dynamics, that were the, original core of Google are the same things here. There's how do they want to consume data? Google used to frown on this idea of having two versions of the page, the version for the
Yeah.
search engine and the version for the human.
Mm.
It's not very clear that actually the AI engines feel the same way about that.
Yes.
In fact, I know
Yes.
there's a number of folks who are experimenting saying yeah, okay, when the AI engine comes, let's format this in a way that's
Yeah.
just going to be easiest for them to consume. And when a human comes here, we want a little bit more of a visual and engaging environment. And so there's a lot of companies doing a lot of AEO, innovation at the moment. But we also have to be honest with each other. First of all, a lot of this is taking some guesses.
Yeah.
There's hypotheses that are being tested.
Yeah.
And not only that, as we're trying to figure this out, it's a moving target. How these engines work, how Claude works versus ChatGPT versus Perplexity. There's a lot of mysteries in this right now. But I think, yeah, okay, this is the mission. So, we as marketers and the Martech vendors who love them, are figuring out okay, how do we start to get good at an actual practice,
Mm.
an actual discipline around AEO?
So that's really interesting. So we're not quite at the stage yet where we can shut down our websites and replace them with JSON, JSON structures. We're not quite there, but it feels like we need to be doing both, and looking to see how that rolls with different types of user interaction.
Yeah. And again, there's a lot of consternation about the fact that, the pattern with Google was really just surfacing pointers to
Mm,
content,
mm,
and people would click through. And that actually was a boon for marketers because it gave us an attribution of like even early in the buyer's journey, we would start to get signals of people. What were they interested in? What were they responding? Maybe we even got to identify them. That's very handy. The challenge, of course, we're facing right now is, consumers are just not necessarily clicking through to the, brand's website in those early stages. If they find where the early answers they want directly in the AI assistant, yeah, they don't feel the need to go to the website. Um, while that is a bad thing from the perspective of marketers wanting to like instrument that whole journey, I'm not sure that's actually all that different of an experience for the consumer. Where again, like a lot of it is like, hey, listen, I'm trying to get, an early sense of, what's out there, what's possible, what should I be thinking about, but then as I get further along in my journey, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna engage with the, brands or the vendors that I actually want to do business with. Now we don't get an attribution trail necessarily from that because they might have not come on a referral. The point in time they actually come and visit our website, could be widely, disconnected from some of the early AI answer research they did. But still, at the end of the day, we ultimately do get, these prospects, these customers coming our way, and we still have to deliver a great experience to them
yes, yes.
when they do.
Yes, yes, yes. So yeah, everything's changed and nothing has changed. I guess we're yeah, we have to help people with great content, really good storytelling, products and services that are compelling, and that's the way that we're going to reach through. It's just a different method of having the conversation, I guess. But I guess an industry that that maybe partly judges itself by how much organic traffic it is achieving, and how well that is increasing, might have to start looking at a different set of metrics. I mean, maybe we shouldn't judge ourselves by the quantity of traffic that we're getting into a site. Maybe it's just the quality of that traffic is going to be more important going forward. Do you have a view on that?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think also this ability to measure how we show up in AI engines.
Mm.
Again, this is a discipline that I would say is evolving.
Yes, yes,
You should take all those things, in my opinion, with a grain of salt.
yeah.
But I think we are starting to get some sense of like, oh, just like, a, traditional market research, might have been like, hey, what is the awareness we have in the minds of our, target, customers? At some level, we're going to want to get a sense of like, what is the AI engine's awareness of our brand in the
Mm.
things that we're relevant to? And I think we will, to a varying or lesser degree, start to hone in on some of those metrics. And that will be one of the things marketers seek to like move the needle on. Um, so, I mean, again, was like, depending on how you want to count it, decades, centuries, of like marketing that happened before the moment when we actually had
Yes,
this highly
yes.
measurable, digital, exhaust, that we could, track and trail. Um, yeah, it's been really nice to have that. It's changing, but the fundamental mission of marketing and delivering great customer experience, as you said earlier, I'm not sure that has changed all that fundamentally.
I guess from the perspective of how brands need to evolve, there's there's obviously the things that we've just spoken about in terms of trying to understand how these different behaviors are turning up, and how we reach through some of these different kind of channels and the different behaviors. But there's also, I think a large part of the work that you've done over the years is to help brands to understand what their own internal, I guess, technology investment looks like, and the different ways that you can slice and dice, where you present information to, or present content to users, how you manage things like personalization, how you store data in systems like CRM and CDP, and ultimately how you then knit all of these together into stable and scalable and effective stacks. And I guess that's been, I guess, the bread and butter of the marketing technologist over the years, is to kind of understand the different I guess, kind of blueprints for doing that, and try to plug it all together in a way that kind of makes sense. How do you see that evolving now? Now that I guess businesses are more, they're almost creating their own internal AI IP. They're kind of creating their own agents. They're creating their own workflows. They're building those systems with their own teams. How do you think that's changing the face of how it all knits together?
Yeah. Well, I guess I would say, what is that way of framing it? The rumors of SaaS being dead are greatly exaggerated. I mean, at the end of the day, so one of the things that's so amazing about AI is the incredible power it gives to individuals.
Mm,
This
mm,
ability to like, oh, listen, I want my own dashboard this way. Oh, I want my own workflow. Oh, I want to, I want to launch this campaign.
yeah, yeah,
And this is an incredibly powerful, set of capability that we're giving to individuals. But when you step back and you're like, okay, as a business, particularly the larger the business is, right? It isn't just every individual going off and doing this their own way and their own workflows and we need to have some degree of coherence. We need to have some sort of like alignment around like, okay, what is the source of truth, of the data? How are we making sure when a customer has an interaction with us here, the way in which that's going to flow through to interactions they have subsequently with us elsewhere, align and match up to that. I mean, this has become, sort of the challenge of orchestration, I think is the way more and more people are talking about this. And that actually lends itself very well to these like primary systems that have been the root of, the core of the Martech stack. The data systems, whether it's, things like CRMs or CDPs, or even increasingly, like we see a lot of flexibility with people just using cloud data warehouses or lake houses or whatnot, which is a really nice way also
yeah.
to pass data across different teams and organizations within the within the company. And so but then even more so this idea of like, okay, you want this sort of like shared data infrastructure and these shared references that we can use for truth. But then also when you start talking about things like interactions and workflows and things like this, we don't want those to be entirely like off the cuff, every single time they spin up. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of what you're seeing is people are using their marketing automation platforms or customer engagement platforms, or in some cases, even like, the evolved iPasses, like Zapier or Workato or things like that, where like, okay, well, let's have these sort of structure. We still want some like scaffolding
Yes.
around particular
Yeah.
activities and particular
Yeah.
workflows. But then within that scaffolding, there are actual steps where we can turn things over to these generative AI engines that are very good at doing things like interpreting unstructured data, being able to synthesize, across multiple threads of data, being able to go out, do dynamic research for us and bring that in and then categorize it the right way. These are amazing capabilities, and we're just barely scratching the surface of, what we can do with that. But the companies I think you see doing this in the most pragmatic way are sort of doing that within the constraints of, okay, these generally same sort of like SaaS technology platform
Yes.
systems that we've used for a while. And then they're sort of doing the AI things on top of that.
I think you mentioned, I think it was in a LinkedIn post a couple of days ago, that if you're a new product entrant into the Martech space and you're a startup and you've got a really really smart, cute new product, one of the best things that you can do is to code a Zapier integration into that. If you've got that, then suddenly you're part, or a make.com or whatever your platform of
Yeah, yeah.
choice is, and suddenly you're part of a huge community infrastructure of capabilities, and that it almost allows that supergraphic map of that you curate to be more kind of self-organizing, I suppose, and to be more to have a more democratic entrance into the marketplace.
Yeah, and by the way, your use of the word curate there is I think you're being generous. But, but yeah, I mean, what was the number one problem that people really had with that landscape? Well, I mean, all right, there's the problem of choice, but setting that aside for a moment, the number one problem is, hey, listen, there's all these amazing innovations happening in all these different, subcategories across marketing, but we need them to work together.
Mm,
And this was actually a very hard problem. First of all, most of those companies didn't pay any attention to integration in the early
yes.
years.
Yeah.
In fact, one of the things that inspired me when I joined HubSpot for 8 years to, build out their platform ecosystem is I'm like, this problem only gets solved if the vendors involved decide integration is a first class
Yes.
requirement.
Yeah.
And the truth is it certainly moved in that direction, but the problem was so much of it had to be point to point developments. Like, all right, if I'm a new product, I have to build this thing for this platform, this thing for this other platform, and so while it got better, it still hit a point of almost diminishing returns of how much you could connect these things. And I think what you're seeing now with some of these AI things like Anthropic's Model Context Protocol,
Mm,
MCP, which is a bit of a standard for how some of these things might be able to talk to each other, so that if I create an MCP server, any MCP client can interact with it, and vice versa. And I think this is some of the things. Yeah, these they used to be called iPaaS, Integration Platform as a Service. They need a
yes.
better term, but like the Zapiers, the N8N, the Workato, the Makes, they're actually really good at that too. But you see them even like embracing MCP and things like
Yes.
that to just like, oh, now you plug me into ChatGPT, and all of a sudden you can use any of these tools however you'd like with. So.
So, yeah, looking at the technology space and the people that work within it, are we going to see I guess, a proliferation of, kind of plug and play, standalone um, products that kind of work together through these kind of integration protocols? And is that almost going to make the supergraphic bigger and bigger and bigger because it's enabled through these orchestration platforms? Or do you think that there's going to be more of a consolidation coming down into I guess enterprise ready suites of tools that work together? And and I guess the follow on question from that is, like, as a technology buyer working for a business, it's like, how do you understand where to start? What is your cornerstone? What's the architecture you build all of this around? Because it feels like there's a number of different entry points now.
Yeah, so I can take a guess, but I just have to disclaim it is a guess. No, like, again, if you'd asked me, 14 years ago what I thought the MarTech landscape would do, I probably would have been like, "Yeah, it might get up to maybe 200 products total." So what do I know? Uh,
Yeah.
but I think it's I think my guess would be I think it's gonna bifurcate. I think, both things are gonna be true. One, for these, like, major platform systems that are providing that sort of, like, backbone and infrastructure, systems of record, the systems of orchestration, I do think those are really critical to making this all actually work, and I think there will be a lot of forces for consolidation in that space. Don't get me wrong, I still think it's gonna be a very large space, but I think other things being equal will be a consolidated set. And so maybe if, you were gonna come up with the MarTech 500, and top it off at that, that would largely capture that cluster. I think on the other side of it, you're gonna see an absolute, like, cornucopia, of these little micro things that are out there that can be plugged in, easily added, easily removed into, that sort of platform orchestration infrastructure. And I guess just one sort of way I think about this, I don't know, this analogy may not hold up over time, but, when you think about the proliferation of websites, who really got panicked about the fact of, oh my God, there's just so many websites out there. What am I going to do? Like when was it the original like Yahoo
Yes.
directory,
Yes.
that started like
Yeah.
taking off like this is just nuts.
Yeah.
But then actually we're like, no, actually this is not a problem because my relationship to any one particular website can actually be very transactional. There are these clear standards around HTTP and HTML, and it's not inconceivable to say like, okay, as AI has this sort of underlying, technical operations capability that just crosses everything. Yeah, to have this idea that you have these much more ephemeral, or specialized point things that, the AI might turn to and leverage and use for a specific thing. We'll see how the transaction mechanisms end up working for that. It's not inconceivable that that could actually be, standardized over the next few years. I think you could have those things out there and it not be as much of a burden, because the way in which we would select and use them would be very different than, like, okay, for these core platforms where we have to think very carefully, they're big investments. That's just maybe a different dynamic.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess it depends on where you're coming from. I mean, if you're a large organization, able to make a substantial investment into your Amazon, your platform, your Google platform, or your Azure platform, you can start there, I guess. But I guess the next generation of startups, or the current generation of startups, are going to be more starting in tools like Replit or in Lovable, and they're going to be like coding away by prompt, doing their audience research by prompts, doing their content generation by prompt, describing workflows that get turned into code, by prompt, and that's going to be the dynamic of doing things. And I guess it's both tremendously exciting, and I guess the question mark comes, you can start a business, you could start a whole new enterprise from that prompt perspective. But what do you need what kind of guardrails do you need to put in place so that you can build the technology resilience, the business resilience, the scalability, the governance, so when you turn into a small startup to a small to medium-sized enterprise, and then to something that's mid-market, you're taking all of your data with you, all of your customers with you, in a way that's sustainable.
Yeah, so many good questions in this. I guess I would also just sort of flag, like, right now, the things with like the Replits and the Lovable and this whole vibe coding movement. I think nothing has gone through the Gartner hype curve
Yes.
faster than that. Where I think even just over a matter of months, we've gone from the peak of inflated expectations to a total trough of disillusionment. But I think we're starting to even see, okay, there's a trough, plateau of productivity. I gotta get my Gartner lingo right. Where okay, no, this stuff, I'm not going to use Replit or Lovable to rebuild Salesforce from
Yes.
up. But actually, if I have this specific dashboard I wanted, or I wanted to do this little interactive calculator for prospects to use on the oh, those are actually very reasonable things for me to do. It's very valuable. So I think we're still we're a long way away, I think, from, hey, I just think what I want and my entire business is materialized around me, which is probably a good thing. Question is yeah, will we get there? Seems like it's like the exponential capabilities here are just going to keep
going.
rolling. So will take us 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, I don't know. But so what are the durable things that are going to exist if software, just like raw technical operations, no longer becomes the differentiator? Well, it's what is the actual service you are delivering to the customer? What's the actual product? Surprise, surprise, not all products are 100% digital.
Yes.
There are physical world products, there are
Yeah.
experiential products,
Yeah.
there are community things. There's a whole bunch of things that actually oh, well, now being able to leverage AI in many ways makes it easier for us to think more ambitiously about other things we can create. As we create those things, what sort of unique data gets created around those services and product experiences and communities? Because again, while the LLMs are essentially commodities on the market right now, the data, that is very specific to your business and your customers is a differentiator. In fact, as we get better at managing that data, it can actually be a very powerful differentiator. So I'm still optimistic. There's going to be a lot of opportunity for differentiated businesses in the world for some time, but differentiating just purely based on software, I think you're right to say, that has a limited time horizon.
Yeah, that's it. Really interesting, really interesting. So, okay, prediction time then, because it's such an easy thing to do in the world that we live in, isn't it? Looking let's take a time horizon, let's say 2 years out. Okay, what do you see happening? Or maybe a fairer question is, what are the range of possibilities that you see happening over the next 2 years, and what should we be, preparing ourselves for?
Yeah, I mean, I do think the single biggest change in this next 2 years is going to be buyer side use of AI, and not just for the, "Oh, I had a question, do a little research, give me an answer." That is almost already, I mean, it's not quite ubiquitous yet, but oh my goodness, the speed at which that's being adopted is, yeah, it is mind boggling. I think we are going to get to a place where buyers are turning more and more things over to their agents to operate on their behalf. One of the ones I'll predict, I think we're going to see is, I'm turning the agent loose on my inbox. I
Yeah,
am never going to look at another piece of unwanted email again. And that doesn't mean I won't still be receiving a ton of those. In fact, for that matter, actually, a bunch of those signals coming in might actually have useful, content or offers or opportunities within it. But me as the human, I'm not going to spend any calories thinking about it. My agent is going to be operating on my behalf, and
yeah,
they'll be cataloging these things and tracking them over time. And if it has questions, it might go out to the website of the person who sent it or reach out to their chatbot and ask them, and then it will surface to me things that are, it believes as it learns what I think is relevant or not, to me. It might make suggestions. I think it's going to be amazing for buyers. I actually do think it's going to be amazing for marketers too, when they figure out how to actually work with that. Just because, let's face it, the efficacy of outbound emails and,
yes,
things, it's just outbound call. I mean, like, that stuff's largely gone away anyway. We're doing it because, I mean, what else are we going to do? But I think, everyone is kind of looking for like a new paradigm
yeah.
of how can we do this in a way to exchange information and surface opportunities and discoveries in a way that's going to be delightful, for people. And I'm optimistic we might see that in these next 2 years.
That's interesting. I guess if one of the markers that you're setting yourself is, how do you effectively, influence and impact your brand upon the memories that are building within, your audience's, agents, then that gives you a certain way of developing content and deploying content. Maybe it's a little bit longer term. Maybe it's got to reach a lot deeper. Maybe you've got to talk more authentically. So it could mean that there's a new age of, I guess, being more attuned to user wants and user needs. I could see that as being a potential outcome.
Yeah. I mean, and again, I think it won't be like, for us as a human receiving this flood of email, there's just no way we could ever even begin to interact with it all.
Mm.
Even if, like, in theory, if you had unlimited time and
Yes.
unlimited patience, you might go through and actually, could you tell me more about this? Or like, I got this better price on this from this other person. Would you be willing to match it? It's a whole bunch of interactions we could have, none of which we have because nobody has time for it. But the sort of like compute scale, for AI is, yeah, buyer side agents could actually mine a lot more, insights, and again, proactively like reach out to the sellers. I have these like amusing thoughts of like, wait, well, have a second, if it's the buyer's agents who's firing off all these emails
Yes.
to, like, the sellers, and,
Yes.
hey, can
Yeah.
you answer this for me? And
Yeah.
in fact, I'm going to give you a
Yeah.
call and
Yeah.
ask you about this, and
Yeah.
until the sellers are
Yeah.
like, for the love of God, man, stop spamming me. But I think what's more likely is, yeah, your agent's going to call my agent, and there will be these like interactions that happen between, buyers and like sellers, not at the human level, but at the agent level. And yeah, it's hard to predict exactly how that shakes out, but I'm pretty optimistic that it might actually lead to more net value for
Yes.
everyone.
Amazing. And I guess, okay, last question. Let's bring it back to people. Um, if you could give just one piece of advice to the next generation of digital leaders coming through, what would it be?
Oh, wow. Take a deep breath. I mean, we're in such this unprecedented time of both the pace of change, but also the scope, just the range of things that are changing. Um, I don't know of anyone I've talked with in like years now who doesn't, if they're being honest, feel overwhelmed by it. Um, and so at some level, acknowledging this actually is a good thing. Like, you're probably not as far behind as you think you are, in the sense that like we're all crazily behind on all of this. And like if you can sort of like accept that as like some sort of Zen state, you're like, okay, what matters here is the world is changing. I know I've got to change. My business has to change, but it's not about being manic. It's not about trying to get your arms around all of it. There's just no way you're going to be able to do that. There's no one on the planet who's been able to do that. But it is about like, hey, listen, every morning I'm going to get up and I'm going to recognize things are changing. I'm going to like learn and I'm going to take steps forward and I'm going to try things and some things are going to work and some things aren't. But, like if you approach this a little bit like, I don't know, the early years of, folks, going out to discover the world,
Yeah.
here be dragons.
Yes. Yes.
This is an age of phenomenal like discovery and adventure. And that's not always comfortable, but I think if you take the right mindset to it, it's kind of
It
exciting
really
too.
is. I mean, it really is. And you think about how this technology is transforming. I mean, yeah, I think there's been maybe two or three kind of major like periods of like excitement and discovery driven by technology. Certainly in my lifetime, I can remember. The first one was probably getting my ZX Spectrum to work. Back in the 90s. I don't know if you had ZX Spectrums out in the States, but we had them here in the UK, and they were tremendously exciting games consoles, and that was amazing what you could do. And then the time you got to see your first email, probably on a college campus on a shared computer that you've been queuing for a while. That was it. That was amazing. And then social media, and then and now we're here. It does feel like a moment of rare excitement and opportunity. So Scott, thank you for helping us to embrace that opportunity today with your effervescent good humour and insight. It's been really great to talk to you, and it'd be great to invite you back on in a few months' time when everything has changed all over again, and and we can laugh at the predictions that we've made on today's session.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me as a guest. Really
Thank you
appreciate it.
so much, Scott. Take care. Bye bye.